Welcome to the Ultimate Bloons TD6 strategy series, where I'm going to be showing you strategies for every single tower from the Dart Monkey to the Beast Handler and every single path in between. This will show you how to diversify your setup and get better, along with seeing some stats, tips and tricks, and all of the strategies for every single one of the towers. And although that the series is geared more towards Chimps mode, this will also show you a lot of tips and tricks that apply to the standard game and will allow you to win with a new style. So we're nearing the end with the Sentry Champion today and the other engineers of the top path, which is the Sprockets and the Sentry Expert. So let's get right into this one. So the Sprockets is actually really good in the early game. It's pretty darn good and not a lot of people use it, so maybe you'll try using it. The Sentry Expert is like a mid-game additive, doesn't generally do that much. It's not known for being like crazy strong, but the Sentry Champion can do some great late game damage, and it's just a really fun tower to use. So let's take a look at the stats. So the stats are like split up a whole bunch because they just have a lot of stats for like every little sentry thing. The Sentry Expert in particular just has a lot of stuff, so you'll be seeing many different pages of like all the different sentries and all of that. I'll talk about more about when the different sentries place a little bit later when we're looking kind of at the examples, but they do have some interesting mechanics. Just note that there's like a lot of different complex things with this guy, and he isn't like that crazy strong, so it isn't really that important. But if you want to look at the stats, I always will have them up just in case you want to see them. And then the Sentry Champion just brings things back a little more simple. Now they're all the same type of sentry and they're actually pretty strong, not like a cold sentry. So when it comes to the crosspaths, for the tier 3, if you're using this guy in the early game, usually I would get 302, but the 310 or 320 can be a decent option. The extra range can come in handy on a lot of particular maps, and then the deconstruction will do a bit more mob damage if you want this guy to be doing a bit to round 42. So if you're using it just for the early game rounds, 302 is usually better, but if you need some help going in to round 40 and you just need a little bit more extra range for some harder maps, 320 can be better. Now in the mid game, it's kind of the same thing. 402 is better against the Bloons, but the Sentry Expert isn't like necessarily that good at taking out Moabs, so you can like increase that damage a bit with the middle cross path. It will be able to do better against Moabs, so you can just keep that in mind. And then for a Sentry Champion, 520, you want the extra Moab damage, and that's basically how it runs down. So you have some options for like early mid game, depending what you need. But when it comes to the buffs, the tier 3 and 4 you aren't going to buff at all, but the tier 5, because it takes out sub towers, you can use Call to Arms and they will get buffed, which is really nice. But the Call to Arms buff you kind of get twice, because it will be buffing the attack speed that the Sentry Champion will be putting out sentries, and then all of those sentries will be getting Call to Arms buffed, and it's really good actually. So you'll be seeing the CTA used a bunch, and on top of this you can throw Overclock, which will then be increasing the output of the sentries, and then Glue Storm, or like just another damage debuff, can do really well. So like Overclock and CTA right here, as you can see, just shreds a ton of fortified BFBs, which is pretty good, but it won't take like Alk buff or anything like that, at least in a decent degree. The attack speed buffs will only be increasing the amount of sentry output, not direct damage. So maps that it's good on, really just any map where the sentries can get decent coverage. This could include multi-lane maps, but if the lanes are kind of spread out, sentries can go in whack positions and just not really attack anything. For the heroes, you could do Etienne, which would give a CTA synergy. Pretty cool idea, but you could also do a tower like Pat or Gwen that would buff the sub towers, or just any other tower in general, because it doesn't really specifically need something, but you can do some cool stuff with it. And the pros is that it has amazing early game, powerful with CTA, fun and unique mechanics, and it does pretty good damage. The cons is that it's inconsistent in the mid game. The sentry placement can't be dumb, and it can't receive many buffs like Alk buff, which is a little bit disappointing in some ways. So let's take a look at the objectives for the example rounds. We do have quite a bit of stuff, so it's going to be Sprockets early, the Sexpert mid game, which is how a lot of people call it. I find it pretty funny, so we'll call it Spexpert, and then the Sentry Champion late game. So a lot of cool things to cover, and this guy has a lot more power that you actually may not know. So let's get right into it. First off, I'm going to be doing a black border on this new map. This is my black border, like first just blind run, and I've said, oh, we got to record this video, so I might as well do my black border with just recording a strat series video. So let's get into it. So basically, I'm going to start off with just a dart monkey and an NG. You can do that dart NG start on many maps and just go straight into these sentries. The sentries are really good early game. I'll have Gwen here, so I'm going to need something to deal with camo, so I'll just get a crossbow, and then Gwen plus well, the Gwen cocktail plus the crossbow should be able to take all of that out, and then Gwen can deal with the leads, but the sentries will actually do pretty well early game. So you could just get that to like the tier 3. Because I'm going to be going for the sentry champion, we are going to be getting middle crosspath, but if you're just using that for the early game, you can go bottom crosspath and it's going to do just fine. So I'll have that middle cross path there, and then we can get it to a sentry expert. It's going to be a little bit wonky sometimes, I feel like, sentry expert, and I honestly don't really like to use it that much. It is a fun tower to use, but sometimes just based on like what balloons are on the screen, because it places out, we'll see a chart for it later. It places the sentries out based on what balloons are on the screen. If you just get a bunch of cold sentries and then just like something like Moabs come out, you kind of can screw yourself. It's funny in a way, but sometimes it can be annoying. But when you get good sentries, it actually does a decent amount of damage. I'm going to be pairing this with a shark, which will be pretty cool, just something to deal some good Moab damage. And then I'm going to be looking for something to kind of clean up with the balloons. The sentry expert, it just doesn't do anything phenomenal. I'm gonna say it's very, very mediocre at best. It does do better against balloons than Moabs typically, but you can just like get weird sentries coming out. I'm looking at you, cold sentry, and it just does some weird things at times. So I'm not gonna be obviously saying that like this is the greatest tower out there, but to go into the sentry champion, sometimes you gotta do it. And if you want to get real funky and real crazy, you can use it in your mid game and just be weird, I guess. I mean, it's fun. I'd give you a lot of brownie points if you do that. So we have that. I'm gonna throw a recursive cluster in there just to be able to deal with some balloons a little bit. I should have gotten that village up to primary training to help it out a bit, because round 63 was a bit close. And then we'll have that shark, just degree 24, and that guy's going to be chomping up some Moabs pretty well. So we got some balloon damage, some Moab damage with the shark, and then just some like whatever damage with the sentry expert, and then Gwen will be doing some cool stuff too. So now we can save up. I'd recommend saving up somewhere like, it's hard to get the Sentry Champion before round 63 because that's a big save up to do. You can do it on easier maps, but on harder maps, I recommend getting Sentry Champion somewhere in the early 70s, I'd say is a pretty good time. So we'll be able to do that here just before round 75 at least, I'd say, maybe even 74. But normally those mid 70 rounds on like your typical advanced gameplay are going to be very easy. Round 64 and 63 are just going to be like kind of harder than whatever else comes in. Plus with your hero leveling up, there really should be no worries. So we'll just have that shark and the recursive cluster being able to take out everything. And then right here on, is it round 70? Yep, on round 70 we can buy the Sentry Champion, and because I don't know what I was doing when I was recording this, I didn't buy it immediately. There we go, we got it now. So we're gonna have that the sentries going down. On this map in particular, it's not like per se, I mean, the greatest. Like the sentries kind of get pushed back sometimes, so they can't be doing as much damage, but it will still be able to do pretty well. So this works just fine. You don't need like the greatest placements. Also, when they expire, they explode and do a whole bunch of damage around it, which is pretty good. So if they're kind of close to the track, you'll be able to get more use out of that. You can like manually micro that to explode them at certain times to be able to just like take up big chunks of stuff, but that's like really, really advanced, and you never want to do that for a black border, I guess. But anyways, we get that, and it's doing a lot of damage. We can just cruise straight through everything, and I'm going to be getting my call to arms now, which, as I mentioned before, will be able to increase the attack speed that the Sentry Champion will put out sentries, then all of those sentries, like plus all the sentries, extra sentries that are down, will be getting more damage and more pierce. So you basically like get the effects of Call to Arms twice, which is really, really good. It makes the Sentry Champion so much stronger, and you don't necessarily need it to do that. We'll see that with the second example, but it's just really nice and really powerful. So if you're going to be doing a strategy that's you get Sentry Champion down early, you can just juice this guy up and he's going to be great. All roided up, he's not natty at this point. We'll overclock him too, so we're just having a lot. And then I think I end up just getting like a relentless glue, and I move on quite far just in this example. So it's really, really strong once you get everything up. On top of that too, when it comes to DDTs, the Sentry Champion takes actually everything out pretty easily. It's a like kind of jack of all trades tower. It doesn't necessarily deal with something better than others. It has good pierce. It takes out like the Moabs pretty well. The BFBs go down pretty well. The ZOMGs will go down eventually. It isn't like bad at doing it. DDTs will go down pretty well too, but when I have Gwen here, we're just going to be destroying that. I feel like out of anything, ZOMGs is kind of where it's weakest most then to DDTs, so this combination actually worked out really well, because I just had all that pierce buffs from CTA, allowing the Sentry Champion just to take out like those big swarms of Bloons like on around 96 there. Then we have Gwen, and the Gwen buff will actually be able to just give more damage to all the sentries, but in particular, a lot more damage to lead balloons, so DDTs are just nothing with the Gwen buff on. And then I had Orca, which is just like eating up all the ZOMGs, so Orca's pretty cool. If you've never used Degree 64 Orca, you might want to try it out. The one issue that we'll have is the BAD, which definitely was an issue, but the Orca was actually able to do that pretty well. So just watch out for round 100. Everything else, the Sentry Champion can do pretty well at. So now looking at the Sentry Expert and the Sprockets. The Sprockets, of course, will just be able to destroy a lot of these early game rounds just fine. It does a lot of good damage to like round 36, for example. If that guy had camo, you'd be able to take it all out with the pin. But now on to the Sentry Expert. As I said, this guy's just very, very mediocre, but if you are really inclined to, you can actually put it in to do like a decent amount of kind of every damage. As you can see there is a chart that showed when these balloons are on screen, the Sentry Expert will put down these turrets, which is just a really weird way of doing it. But as you can see here on Ancient Portal, it can like kind of damage these mobs. I was able to take out one of them. It takes out the balloons generally better, but it's not necessarily like the greatest thing in the world. So just a very mediocre tower, but it's just like so bizarrely made. I think it's kind of funny, so I'd use it. I mean, might as well at this point. So now let's take a look at just another example. This is going to be just showing on an intermediate map here, Crack, just showing kind of an easier approach. You don't have to be like all crazy, like using CTA this blah blah blah, using mid-game towers to get early. You can really just take things easy with Sentry Expert. So you can pick some towers that will synergize well, of course, and you can also use these to kind of synergize not only in the late game, but think about in the early and mid game. So for example here, we're going to be going for just Etienne down. We're going to get camo, and I guess we'll have UCAV or whatever whenever for that, and then I'll get a crossbow too. And just like in the other example, I had the just a bunch of pierce and damage being done with the 320 of the, well, I guess 320 in this case because I'm bringing it up to Sentry Expert, but you can also just have it like in the early game as 302, but just the 320 here doing some good damage, taking out all these balloons like 35, 37, 38, 39, not an issue. It's going to be actually doing really good against round 42 because it does have that bonus damage, so those turrets will be doing nice damage. And then I have that that crossbow over there too, and that's going to be taking out the camos. I'm going to grab an alk buff because we actually have nothing to get lead, and I'm going to alk buff that crossbow later on anyways, but this combination will do plenty good damage, and it's going to be doing pretty strong. And then we can get Sentry Expert just to kind of deal with some more balloons, do some extra damage to Moabs, and with that we'd then be able to save up for like a crossbow master, for example. You could just pick like other towers and it will work out well with. So here it just worked amazing. We had good damage, good Moab damage, Actually, more so like the crossbow took out the Moabs really well, and the Sentry Expert took out the Bloons pretty well, and then that Alk buff pulled everything together, and we get free camo too from Etienne, which is really nice. Then from there, you can just save straight up. The Crossmaster took me all the way to the Sentry Expert. No, not the Sentry Expert. You're a Sentry Champion by now. You're better than an Expert. And then from there, we can just let this guy chill. On some beginner maps, you don't really have to worry about much. Like beginner or intermediate maps, as long as you just have like a few tier 5s that synergize decently well, you'll be able to do well in a support tower. I just threw in that relentless glue to help out, and then I'll just get another tier 5 later because we can do it. So you can use it chill, you can use it more complicated and do some cool stuff, but it's just a really fun tower, and Sentry Champion definitely is amazing, so I recommend, as always, for every tower, check it out. Thanks for watching. If you want to help out the channel, you can check out these new videos, like and subscribe for more content, support the channel by becoming a member, and joining the Discord to chat with the community. Bye!